Welcome back to the Transform Nation Telethon. I'm yours truly, Randy Prasad, back here in the saddle. We have been at this since 7 in the morning, and I got to thank the amazing volunteers that's been on deck here, all the community support, and all of your pledges has come on board to help make this worthy cause so vibrant and so focused in our entire community. The whole Rogers team has been on board for this, and we can't thank you enough. You know what? When you talk about epidemics that are happening within our society, child obesity is right there, right at the #1 top. And we need to address this. In all the four corners of Peel region, I am asking you, please call us 905-282-6870 and please pledge generously. $1, $100, it doesn't matter. Use any credit card you will. All the funds goes for the transformationinc.org organization. And what are they responsible for? Quite simply, to produce meaningful programming for children with obesity in terms of providing food, providing education, providing activities. All these key components. We need to spread the education, but we need to invest in our future. And our future is our children. But how are we going to do that? To build a community, we need our community, and we're asking you for your support. Please join us on the campaign for change. Join us on the fight to end child obesity, and make sure you call us 905-282-6870 and be a part of the future of the solution. You know what? I'm joined by a very special guest, Jennifer Desmond here. You are actually the president of a nonprofit women's health organization called ROPE. And you know, during the course of this broadcast, we've seen so many great acts and so many awareness campaigns throughout this show. But one key component that we haven't touched on that you're an expertise in is trauma. And there's a tremendous correlation between childhood obesity as a result, as the end result in terms of trauma. Trauma almost seems like the algorithm, and the solution is obesity. I want you to give me your insights in terms of how does trauma formulate themselves through a child's mind, and how do they find comfort through these toxic foods and the junk food and whatnot that has plagued our kids today?
Well, Randy, when it comes to childhood obesity and trauma, they're quite closely related to our nutrition, as we know. A lot of the sugar foods that we eat, foods that are high in sugar, introduce a type of inflammation in our body. That alone breaks down the system. That is one form of introduction. Also, there's other forms of trauma that happens to the child.
So you're talking in terms of that level, the trauma is just at the cell state. It's not necessarily a neural state of trauma.
Well, it can be.
Okay.
You see, trauma happens to a person in different ways. Let's take the child, for instance. Children, they play together. Well, first of all, if they have no governance in what they eat, that breaks down the system. It sets the game for other diseases and ultimately trauma.
Right.
But then you have that child who might be playing out with other kids and they get teased.
Right.
That introduces a different type of trauma.
Right.
Now, kids grow up with all kinds of name calling, accidents, they fall down. When they're obese, when they're overweight, their body cannot hold up. When they fall down, you break bones, you injure yourself, you heal very slowly.
You know what, and we talk, in terms of trauma, we hear a lot of terms around with depression and anxiety, panic attacks, and a lot of people use such foods, narcotics, alcohol, to curtail that. But I think in terms of the media, we've used the term trauma very loosely. Trauma is a response, or the consumption of these foods a response? I guess in basically, what exactly is trauma?
Well, trauma comes in all forms. I mean, even the foods that are very high in sugar is causing trauma to our system, our tissues, our cells. It breaks it down at a cellular level, and it continues to break down if there's no change in the actual nutritional intake in that young individual.
So it disrupts the whole flow of the biology of the body, and more importantly, the mind as well.
And the mind cannot grow, it cannot function appropriately. So you have all these other issues that is being incorporated into that person's life, that child's life, and all of a sudden it's blossoming. Sometimes we tend to lose sight of the actual start of that because it's just very slowly, it creeps in to
Well,
the
it's
life.
almost like the 21-day habit formula where you creep it in really slowly, as you were saying, and then over time, it's almost like a snake bite. The poison will eventually consume
Of
you.
course.
Now, at what point, how does one realizes they're in a state of trauma to the point where they need to stop and ask themselves, I can't consume this. I can't consume this food anymore because it's making me obese. I can't consume the alcohol, the narcotics, and other drugs because they've built habits. And it's hard for these people who are suffering with obesity to seek help when they find such a delusion sense of comfort. Their judgment call is not delusion, they're just going by habit. But how do they stop themselves and say, you know what, I need help when they've been just so indoctrinated biologically by these chemicals?
Sometimes they can't. It is so addictive that by the time they catch themselves to where they are in their lives dealing with those issues of obesity, of disease, of trauma itself, sometimes it's a cry for help.
Right.
If you take the person that is suffering from depression, they don't know what is the actual cause. Sometimes you go to the doctor will say, oh, it could be seasonal depression, it could be from medications, it could be emotional issues.
Right.
But no one ever tends to think that it could be from our actual foods, the foods that we're eating.
Well, and you know what, and I think the problem is, for those who consume these fast foods, or whether drugs or alcohol, it's an immediate fix. The sad reality is that these nutritious, great foods that are so good for you, it takes time. It's an investment in time to enter in your system and to have the body heal itself. The narcotics, the junk food, or whatnot, it's an immediate quick fix. When you crave that quick fix so badly, how do you discipline yourself to sit back and say, you know what, I can't go there. I need to invest 3 months to transform my body? Because addiction, we hear that term all the time, but I don't know, for people who don't suffer, they don't really understand the magnitude of how this consumes you.
Unfortunately, that individual really needs help. Sometimes we go down a slope that we cannot stop, and unfortunately it ends with trauma. Some persons, they're so overweight, their body just cannot carry them,
Right.
and they end up breaking bones.
Right.
Even if they go for surgery, they don't heal very fast, they don't heal very well, because their system is overloaded, like you said,
Right.
with all the other
Right.
the intake that whatever the diet, you say you can look at a person and tell what their diet is like.
Yes.
Do you believe that?
You know, sure, of course. I mean, well, you know what? It really does depend. I mean, okay, let's take the sumo wrestler athlete, for example. They're deemed as athletes. One person may say that in their culture, they would say, you know what? They are athletes. In the Western culture, they may be perceived as obese or overweight. So it really depends on perspective. I think nutrition is not about being super thin. It's not about being muscular. I think it's being in proportion to your biology. And I can't say what that proportion is because every individual is different.
Now, also, now there was a study that I did read that says obesity could be genetics.
Right.
But in actual fact, I mean, we can actually help ourselves when we are dealing with issues of obesity. Sometimes it's, like I said, it's a slippery slope.
Right.
If you don't check yourself, sometimes at the end of the day,
Right.
you're there and you need the help of a professional to help you back on track. There's other times when people can catch themselves because, for instance, programs like these, where we're educating the public on what to look for, what kind of food choices to deem in your grocery store. Now, mind you, trauma also comes from some families who they don't have the means to eat properly.
Right. And we mentioned that earlier in the course of the broadcast, where economics plays a tremendous toll. If you want to eat absolutely healthy through organic foods, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. It's much cheaper to buy the sodium-rich pastas in the box as opposed to buying kale, a large batch of that, or whatnot, because the costs are very high. And if you're a single parent, to have to feed 2 children or more, you're going to want to feed them to survive as opposed to feed out of nutrition. And is that the parent's fault?
Well, but it starts at home.
But
Parents sets
but
the
if the
stage.
child dies, so where do we weigh our ethics here? Do we feed them to survive, or focus on nutrition even if it means going bankrupt?
I think we should focus on nutrition. A healthy nation is a healthy nation. And the thing is, if we don't focus on nutrition when the kids are young, they grow to be obese adults.
Right.
Obesity is costing the healthcare system millions and millions of
Well,
dollars.
you know what? There's a statistic over in the United States. Is actually $110 billion of healthcare costs of U.S. dollars goes towards healthcare costs. It is astronomical. Obesity will probably grow with our children to about 40% if we don't address this by the time 2040 comes around. And these are absolutely real statistics, and it is very scary. But I think it comes from the power of the mind. And I think, where do people can go for help to get out of this state of depression? And we're not talking, this is a quick fix. This is an investment in yourself over time. I think consuming good foods heals the mind, but it's a catch-22. If the mind is not ready, you're not going to consume. So how do you find discourse to resolve yourself when you're in so much pain, physically through obesity and also mentally? Because I think obesity physically is the product of maybe an unhealthy mind.
That's very, very true. There's no quick fix, like you say, but there is help out there. There's a lot of community agencies out there that's now set up. Obesity is a national strategy, and it needs to be owned by individuals as well as community partnerships in order to beat the whole obesity thing. Now, having said that, you can always go to your doctor if you're suffering from depression. Sometimes it is organic, and sometimes it isn't.
I don't know about that. I don't know. I know you're a practicing surgeon by trade. Yes, that's right.
Not surgeon.
She is a jack of all trades in terms of medicine, so she's absolutely phenomenal. Is it cynical for me to say that I don't exactly trust everything that's prescribed to us out there, that they could actually be perpetuating the problem with these pharmaceutical drugs? Like, okay, the difference between the drugs on the street and the drugs that pharmacies give you is that one's legal and one isn't. The FDA doesn't support all organic herbal medicines because it's not FDA approved. They're run by a lobbying arm. How can we actually trust that what a lot of doctors prescribe to us, given that these drugs that they prescribe actually perpetuates the condition and you become addicted to their drugs as opposed to the street drugs? How do we value the authenticity of prescription drugs to get us out of a mental state of depression to eradicate obesity? And I know that was a mouthful, but I'm very passionate about it. I believe in medicine to some degree, but organic medicine is not mainstream. Prescription drugs are, and they pull the problem. But I want your insight. Am I wrong?
Well, I don't know how to really answer your question. That is a mouthful, and it is my forte.
Right.
But having said that, we have to trust.
Am I wrong to be cynical?
Well, there's a lot of cynicism out there.
Because I think the problem is that people don't ask questions.
And that is very true.
And it's not out of ignorance, but I mean,
they just don't know where to go to find the answers.
Right.
And you're right.
Can you trust the doctors?
I believe so. I believe our system is very safe.
I want to hope so, but go on. Yeah.
I believe we have a very safe system. Our doctors here in Canada, they're quite proficient. Everyone knows what is happening with individuals out here. We're all struggling. We're all struggling to make ends meet, especially at home with our meals. Not all of us can handle that. Yes, sometimes depression and other issues in obesity can be organic or genetic. But yes, you're right. It is also brought on by certain efforts, individual efforts that we do take on personally. Now, in terms of the drug administration, I think they're trying to do their very best to combat this. I think they're trying to do their best to address the needs. I'm not so. I don't really know how to answer this question, to be honest with you, because
it is a much bigger.
I am part of that system,
right?
But I also believe in a naturopathic medicine system as well, and so that comes back to organics. Now, you said before that you're right. the best foods to go is organic, but not everyone can afford that.
Right.
But not necessarily, because even the organic foods, even as costly as they are, sometimes doesn't really meet the need of that individual.
Right.
I mean, over the counter, going to a normal grocery store, you can still buy the same foods to prepare your body against trauma.
Right.
Now, it's important that we understand too that if you're already obese, ideally you want to work on your weight issues. That also can lead to depression. That also can lead to trauma. Because sometimes the doctor will say, okay, now we have to put you on this exercise program to lose some weight, you know, change your diet, and this ultimately would lead you in a path that would lead you down a healthy road. But that person's been so accustomed to living a certain way for so long.
Well, it's hard to break those habits.
It's the effort
Absolutely.
there. And sometimes a lot of people do try, but then, like I said, the bones are weakened because of the extra weight.
Right.
You already have heart issues.
Absolutely.
You have other diabetes from increased sugars.
Right.
You have all these other phenomenal things going on that to arrest the problem sometimes could be a serious.
You know what? And you know what? Absolutely, Jen. And you know, we can actually go on for hours on this particular topic. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for your time. Folks, 905 is the number, 232-6870 is the number to call. Your campaign, your support through all the coins you can to help us out will be truly appreciated. Folks, we're going to be back with more on the telethon here to end obesity. Stay with us for more after this.
You are watching live coverage of the Transform Nation Telethon exclusively on Rogers TV. Tune in all day today until 7 p.m. in support of raising funds to end childhood obesity. To make a donation, please visit www.transformnation-inc.com.